welcome to this town hall meeting hosted by the Digital Transformation Unit under the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology. This evening we will explore how technology is transforming our nation, improving, improving how we live, work and connect with the government. Guided by the theme Digital Innovation for a Sustainable Island State, we'll hear from the key leaders driving this transformation and engage with you, the public, as valued partners in this digital journey. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, both in person and virtually. We are live on Freedom FM 106.5, the Digital Transformation Unit's Facebook page, which we encourage everyone to like and follow, and we are also live on the SKNIS Facebook page. I'm Carla Berridge, and I will be your moderator this evening. At this time, I encourage everyone to place their phones on silent, please. Thank you so much. To officially open the program, we begin with an invocation by Mrs. Emelita Warner-Paul.
Good night, one and all. We may stand. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Loving God, the Lord of all ages, the Alpha and Omega, the Creator of all things, we humbly bow in your presence this evening as your word reminds us to give thanks in all things. So we come by to first thank you for this day. You woke us up this morning and have kept us in our right minds to this very hour. We thank you for this opportunity to be part of the digital world. Lord, we pray for guidance as we enter into this part of the global space. We seek your divine protection on the usage and as a government with the largest workforce, we seek the indwelling of the Holy Spirit to direct the users of such along good, honest, and diligent pathways. Lord, wherever harm may come, we bind such forces of evil. As we have planned, you are the one who executes. I bring before you all who will be presenting this evening. Give them clarity of mind that all who are here listening or even on the virtual space will have a clear and even a clearer understanding of what the e-world we as a nation are about to enter into. Father, now God, we ask that you take full control of this evening's proceedings, blessing all who have taken the time to be here. And as we leave, Father, now God, we pray that whatever is said and done will be to your honor and to your glory, granting them journeying mercies as they go home, and we pray for good night rest. All these mercies we ask in the wonderful name of Jesus, who taught us to say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from all evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. You may be seated.
Thank you to Mrs. Warner-Paul for those uplifting words of reflection. Minister of Information and Communication Technology, Honorable Congress Maynard, and other government officials. Chief Digital Transformation Officer, Mr. Nigel Carty. Presenters, members of the community, the media, our listening and viewing audience, welcome. This evening's program will feature three main presentation segments, each designed to give us a deeper understanding of the government's digital transformation journey. Our first segment will focus on the government's commitment to the digital transformation overview, where we'll hear from Honorable Congress Maynard, Minister of ICT, and Mr. Nigel Carty, Chief Digital Transformation Officer. The second segment will feature project overviews, where members of the DTU team will share progress on key national projects, including the electronic civil registry system, the electronic identification system, and the legislative work supporting these initiatives. Our third and final segment will highlight specific projects and citizen-centered innovations, showcasing how digital transformation is improving public services, trade, and change management across government. After these presentations, we'll open the floor for a question and answer segment, where you'll have the opportunity to engage directly with our presenters. And now to begin our first segment, please join me in welcoming to the head table Honorable Conway Maynard, Minister of Information and Communication Technology, and Mr. Nigel Catty, Advisor and Chief Digital Transformation Officer. I will now invite Minister Maynard to present the government's commitment to digital transformation modernization, focused on citizen-centered services, inclusion, transparency, and sustainable national development. Please welcome Minister Maynard.
Pleasant good evening to everyone. A pleasant good evening to everyone. Allow me to acknowledge, of course, the presence of our Chief Digital Transformation Officer, His Excellency Nigel Catty, also IC Permanent Secretary, Ministry of National Security, P.S. Blanchett, and all other government officials here, and industry practitioners in the or internet or digital space. It is really a pleasure and an honor for me to be here this evening as we come to engage in what is an important and open conversation about the digital transformation journey of our beloved Federation, St. Kitts and Nevis. This town hall really is what I would say a vital part of our government, your government's ongoing commitment to transparency, to inclusion, and collaboration as we move our country toward becoming a sustainable island state, a vision that, of course, you know is championed by our Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew, and his entire cabinet. Digital transformation is about using technology to improve the way that we live, the way that we work and interact with government and each other. It is about building a smarter, more efficient, and more inclusive society where citizens and residents can access services more easily, businesses can operate more efficiently, and government can function more effectively and, importantly, more transparently. Digital transformation is not a passing trend. It is a national imperative and one of the critical pillars of our sustainable island state agenda. See so, we must not be left behind. The Ministry of ICT's approach to digital transformation is built on three main pillars. Firstly, people transformation. This is empowering our citizens with the skills, knowledge, and tools to thrive in the digital age. This includes improving digital literacy, upskilling our workforce, and ensuring that no one, not the elderly, not the disabled, not the low-income family, is left behind as we transition to a digital economy. In the new digital economy, your government is creating a host of new employment and business opportunities that will emerge in the following areas: digital infrastructure and cloud services, data and artificial intelligence, digital government and public services, software development and technology innovation, digital business and entrepreneurship, cybersecurity, and digital trust, and digital skills and education. Just earlier this year, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, through the Office of the Prime Minister, launched what was a national cybersecurity program aimed at equipping participants with internationally recognized certifications and work-integrated learning opportunities in the rapidly expanding field of cybersecurity. On the digital transformation, these kinds of opportunities will continue to expand. And they will continue and they will expand. The second pillar of digital transformation is process transformation. So first you have people transformation, and now we also have process transformation. This is rethinking and redesigning how government services are delivered. We are streamlining procedures, reducing bureaucracy or red tape, and ensuring that government becomes more efficient, more responsive, more transparent, and importantly, more citizen-focused. Your government has embarked on the digitalization of records of births and deaths at the Bastia Health Center, transforming it into a modern electronic civil registry system, or ECRS. Paper records going as far back as the mid-1800s are being digitized and made more secure. In the not-too-distant future, citizens will be able to apply for their certificates online and receive digital copies of the same. If you ever have had to apply for a passport, you have gone to the post office to buy stamps. You've made a trip to the criminal records office, in our case by the police station, and then to the Bastia Health Center to obtain a copy of your birth certificate before you go down to government headquarters. The good news is that your government is now working to develop an online passport application portal where citizens here at home as well as abroad can make their applications online in the comfort of their home. This is indeed a process transformation that is people-focused. Now, the last pillar of digital transformation is technology transformation. It entails modernizing our digital infrastructure and adopting secure, interoperable, and scalable technologies that enable innovation and seamless service delivery. This evening, the team for the Ministry of Technology will provide further insight into critical technology projects. These three pillars will work together to build a foundation for a modern digital government. One, of course, that is people-centered, efficient, resilient, and sustainable. Now, our journey toward digital transformation is supported by strategic partnerships with global leaders in digital innovation, such as the government of the Republic of China on Taiwan. I ask you to put your hands together for their support, continued support. Cybernetica out of Estonia, and the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Taiwan has been a consistent partner for over 40 years and is providing technical expertise and financial support for the development of our digital identity system. Estonia, a small northern European country, is one of the most digitally advanced nations in the world. We are leveraging Cybernetica's expertise to build a highly secure digital identity system. The Tony Blair Institute is providing support in shaping policies, frameworks, and governance structures that ensure our digital transformation is strategic, that it is inclusive, it is efficient, and, as I said before, definitely sustainable. While our international partnerships are vital, we are equally committed to building strong partnerships right here at home. Local businesses are the backbone of our economy, and their participation is essential to the success of digital transformation. Through collaboration with our local ICT firms, entrepreneurs, and startups, we are fostering innovation. We are creating jobs and ensuring that the benefits of the digital economy are shared widely across our society. Digital transformation is about empowering our people. And this government rather, is focused on doing just that. So in closing, let me assure you that digital transformation is fundamentally aligned with our national sustainability goals, contributing to economic growth, environmental protection, and social equity. We are committed to an environmentally conscious transformation, utilizing digital tools to reduce our carbon footprint through paperless processes and optimizing resource management across all government operations. None of this, of course, would be possible without the extraordinary teams at the Ministry of ICT and the Digital Transformation Unit. And I ask you to put your hands together for the significant work that they have been doing to bring us this far. Digital transformation requires an unwavering focus on the people that we serve. Our commitment is clear: to leverage the power of technology to build a government that is more accessible, that is more transparent, and really a true partner in realizing our shared vision for a prosperous and sustainable St. Kitts and Nevis. It has been an honor, of course, to bring this address to you this evening. And as we reaffirm our government's steadfast commitment to digital transformation and public sector modernization. Through digital transformation, we are reimagining governance, empowering citizens and communities, and laying the foundation for a sustainable St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you to Minister Maynard for reaffirming the government's strong commitment to innovation and inclusion. I now invite Mr. Kati, who will outline the role of the Digital Transformation Unit, the national roadmap, and how global best practices are being applied to build a smarter, more connected government.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairlady. Good evening to all of you. Thank you for being here. Let me pay special recognition to our Minister of Technology, the Honorable Connis Maynard, Permanent Secretary, Mr. Glenroy Blanchett in the Ministry of National Security. I also want to recognize Mr. Samuel Iferi, representative from the Tony Blair Institute in St. Kitts. And of course, I want to recognize the team from the Department of Technology and the Digital Transformation Unit. I'm Nigel Kati, and my information is on the screen. I want to start by giving you a sense as to why digital transformation. Digital transformation is really an imperative under this government's Sustainable Island State agenda. It didn't just drop out of the air. It is an agenda on which the Prime Minister is leading and being strongly supported by the Cabinet Ministers. Digital transformation is not just a fad. It is an imperative. And the Prime Minister in July of this year said that digital transformation, the Sustainable Island State Agenda, which we call CISA, are not just here for the sake of themselves. They're here because the government wants to be able to serve people better. It is about creating a sustainable island state. And digital transformation is a key pillar of that agenda. What do we mean by a sustainable future? It is about whether we can anticipate in the future a St. Kitts and Nevis that is more resilient, more prosperous, safer, more harmonious, economically stronger, and where employment, business opportunities, education, healthcare, and basic resources are guaranteed to all of our people. Critically important. I just want to show you this slide, just in case you haven't seen this. This is what the government has identified as the 7 pillars of progress under its CISA, Sustainable Island State Agenda. And while I'm not going to go through all of them, I just want to point out two, which I think we all can appreciate. Energy transition. In order for St. Kitts and Nevis to be sustainable, we have to make the transition to renewable sources of energy, cleaner sources of energy. And so the government is busy making investment in geothermal and solar installations. And secondly, water. We all know the problem with water. We can't be a sustainable island state until and unless we're able to ensure that all of our people can have access to adequate amounts of water when they need it and at an affordable price. The others are there. What is digital transformation? It is really about using digital technologies, electronic technology, to improve the way our government functions, the way it serves people, increases access to ordinary citizens, and all citizens, in fact, and the way we use technology to take care of the environment. So, broadly speaking, what are the benefits of digital transformation? Firstly, enhanced efficiency and productivity. We want government officers to be able to work more efficiently, smarter, and therefore be more responsive to people. We want our citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis and residents, whether here or abroad, or citizens, of course, to be able to access services that the government is delivering. So, you've heard about the passport project, for example. We want our citizens, whether they are resident here or abroad, to be able to apply for passports online. We want them to be able to apply for their birth certificates online. And of course, we want them to be able to access the government's services, the tax division, wherever those services are. We want to make government services more accessible at your fingertips. Thirdly is transparency and accountability. This is something that I know is on the minds of every citizen and resident. Transparency and accountability. Technology allows that, it facilitates that. There's a lot of information in government departments that you don't have access to because it's on paper. And that's not going to be made easily available to you. When that becomes digitized, then it can be made available to as many people as you would like. And there are others, data-driven decision-making. We want the government to be able to make decisions based on information that the government has access to. For example, the hospital. People pass to, does the government know, for example, how many people pass to the hospital, what they suffered from, the average time they spend in the hospital, what kind of medication most people subscribe to? That information is there somewhere, but it's not pulled together and be given a chance to be properly analyzed for the government to use that in its planning. And that's just one example. You can think across the whole of government. We have that challenge. You make the information available electronically, then government can harness that information for better planning and decision making. What are the three dimensions of digital transformation? The minister spoke to these. People transformation, process transformation, and technology transformation. People transformation. It's training people to take the opportunities that are becoming available. It is training people for specific jobs that they already have in government, which are being transformed as a result of digital transformation. So, for example, the young ladies who are working at the passport office, once that office becomes digitalized, then they will have to work with different tools and they'll need different skills. So that's one aspect of it. We'll have to change mindset. There are people who have a mindset that things shouldn't go forward. We should remain in the past. And I'm sure that people have come here to be able to discuss and to see whether we should move forward on some of the important changes which are coming our way. We want to discuss those with you. And we also wanted to point out some of the key opportunities which we believe will become available to our people: software and systems and cloud development, cybersecurity and digital trust, data science and artificial intelligence and analytics, to name a few. This slide is really from a cybersecurity training session or course, which is being spearheaded by the Office of the Prime Minister. This was launched in February of this year. Because the government already understands that as we expose more and more of our assets digitally, cybersecurity has to become an even greater concern. And therefore, we have already begun training our people in this area. And training in other areas will continue and increase. And so we are not just providing the training, we are providing the tools. This is an important tool. In fact, one of the most important tools in reorienting our people toward digital transformation. Process transformation is making processes more efficient. It's not simply slapping technology onto old processes. In our department, we have people like Diana who are process managers who go into government departments and say, how can we streamline this process? How can we make it ready for digital transformation? And so it is about all of those things. But critically importantly as well, we have legislative transformation, policy transformation. And this evening we have someone from the Attorney General's office who's going to be going through a number of those important changes for us. But these changes are required so that we know how new systems will function, who will be responsible, who will be held accountable, how the data will be stored, how people's information must be protected, and what steps they can take if they're not satisfied that their information is protected. And lastly, technology transformation. It's about putting technological solutions to work for the government and for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. I won't go through all of these, they're there for you to see, but we have already made mention of the civil registry project, converting those paper-based records at the birth certificate's office to digital format, and then creating a system where people can begin to apply online and respond and get responses electronically. I also want to make mention of our digital identity, or EID, authentication system. That is something which I know some of you have come to discuss this evening, and we are prepared to discuss that. Online passport application system, online business application platform, trade single window, and our national addressing system. This slide gives you a graphic of how these systems are intended to work. So we have the ECRS, which is the Office of Births and Deaths and Adoptions and so forth. That information is being digitized. But that information will now feed into our EID system. Because when you go to sign up for your EID, your digital ID, there needs to be some basic foundational information that the system is going to use to establish your identity. You can't just walk in and say, well, I'm Mr. Welch. You have to say, well, this is my information. That information has to be verified against the ECRS database where we have our records of births and deaths. And then for persons who are not born here, but are citizens through some other means, naturalization, by investment, etc., and residents, their information are not at the Barnstable Health Center, but are at the Ministry of National Security. That information has to be made available to the system for the system to be able to properly or establish your identity. So the overall picture that we want is that government will be highly interconnected. Offices of government will be highly interconnected, so that if you were to go to the passport office, you don't have to go up to the health center to get your birth certificate. You don't have to run down some place for a stamp. You don't have to run across by the police station for your criminal record. From one office, all of this information is going to be accessible. But I want to warn you that this information is not just an open pool for all to access. There'll be specific areas of information that will be accessible. So let's take, for example, Mr. Blanchett, he's the PS of National Security. And we have this new online passport application system. His system will not be able to just simply access all the information in the police records office, just the information that is necessary for the specific transaction that is being conducted. So there'll be rules specifying what information can be made available to other government departments. So we have to be very careful about that. So this is my final slide. This is what digital transformation is really about. This is what I call the so what of digital transformation. It's new governance and institutional frameworks for how government will do business. It is legal and regulatory frameworks, of which you'll hear a bit about later. It's about cultivating digital talent, training people in cybersecurity, part of our change management process, providing the infrastructure and technological tools, and finally, new digital processes and digital services for people to access wherever they are. Thank you very much for listening. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you to Mr. Carty for that insightful presentation. Please join me in thanking Minister Maynard and Mr. Carty for leading us off this evening. Thank you so much. We will now reconfigure the head table for our next segment, the project overviews. For this segment, I invite to the head table Mr. Eric Haynes, Program Manager at the Digital Transformation Unit, Mr. Sancho Duncan, Enterprise Architect, ICT, and Crown Counsel Kyle McKechnie of the Attorney General's Office. The project overviews will highlight key digital systems currently being implemented. Firstly, I will invite Mr. Haynes, who will update us on the electronic civil registry system, highlighting milestones, benefits, and how citizens will soon have access to vital records online.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, good evening. My name is Eric Haynes. I'm program manager, one of three, with the Digital Transformation Unit. That's the unit which Mr. Carty spoke a couple minutes ago. So I would like to adopt the protocol established by the Minister and Mr. Carty in terms of welcoming all our guests and the citizens and persons from this community. So I'm going to speak today a little bit about the ECRS, as we call it, easily known as the the birth registry, or the civil registry, as we've been calling it, the ECRS. Okay, so most of you here know or familiar with St. Kitts and how we do things, right? So we have the civil registries under the Ministry of Health, and I would like to thank all of the ladies who are up there who work hard, because you go up to the civil registry, you go in, you sit down and you wait, and they actually have to write your birth certificate or the death certificate or your marriage certificate. So you can imagine all the years that they've been doing this. I mean, they deserve a hand. They deserve a whole lot more than a hand, I think, right? But they do a good job for all these years. So, you know, hands down to the ladies up at the registry. So what you realize is there's a need for modernization of this system. Mr. Carty mentioned it. You have to go down to the post office. You have to buy the stamps, journey up to the registry, wait for them to actually write it up for you. So what we're trying to do with the digitization is to get to a place where you don't have to do all of this thing. You can probably do, as we call it, a one-stop shop. Okay? So we'll go into the digitization of the records first. So simply, what you have up at the registry are books. I don't know how much of you have actually seen these books. They're about 2 feet by 4 feet, right? And each of those books has in about 60 to 70 pages, maybe more. And on each page, you have 8, depending on the book, 6 to 8 records per page. So what's happening for the digitization process is we have to take a picture of every single page of those, and I'm just guessing about 1,000 books, right? Because we have records going back to about 1860. So we have to take a picture of all of those pages. When you finish taking a picture, then we have to, of each record, we still have to what we call cropping, which is just taking a single record of each of those pages. So you can imagine the time, the diligence it takes to do all of that. From the cropping stage, we go and we have to now enter all those records into the database. And when I say enter, it's not automatic. Persons literally have to sit down and type, right? When I see some of the writing on this, it's like, you know, anybody can read their doctor's prescriptions? I can't. And some of the writing is like that. But these ladies up there, again, they know how to read and how to interpret because they've been doing it for years. So all of that information has to be entered manually into the database. Now, this is where it gets interesting. As they enter it, before it's accepted, there's actually 2 verification processes. One, the first one as it's entered, we have somebody, what we call the verifier. The verifier just looks at the record, they look at the page, and make sure that they match up, right? Very important. Secondly, we do a second verification on this too, where we call the, yeah. Yes. So we have a second approval process. So just to make sure that we get it right, there's actually 2 approval processes before that information is saved. And as Mr. Carty would have mentioned, you see how it's important it is because this data actually feeds into other processes. So we have to make sure we get it right. And then finally, after the second approval, what we do is we want to archive those books, right? Some of the books are very old. As I said, they're from 1860. So it's going to take us some years, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years, depending on the condition of the books, to actually get all of this information in. And we have to be very careful with some of these books. Sometimes they say, you turn the page and the book wants to crumble. So we have to be very careful with that. So if you look at the screen right now, you would see that we have some persons working on it. And in the second picture is actually what happens when they scan the book or they take the picture of the book. That's actually an actual book there in the cradle. And those are 2 cameras, one pointing at each page. And then there's a light in the center to make sure you get a good picture of it. And they have to do that for every single page, for every single book. And I said, I'm guessing about 1,000 books up at the registry. So it's going to take some time to get it right. And these are the ladies. We couldn't actually show something on the screen because that would have been personal data. So even in presentations, we have to make sure that we keep person's data secure. But they will be entering the information on the screens for us. And last but not least, this is actually a space in the registry. Very limited on space up there, as y'all would know who's gone up there. We're very limited in space, but this is a space that we reserve for the additional persons that we're going to have entering data. So this is the digitization is phase 1. So we're going to have a phase 2. And I mentioned before, payments. No more stamps alone, right? The idea is to actually allow you to pay by, let's say, credit, debit card when you go up to the center to get your birth or whatever certificate it is, right? So want to introduce payment options. Because I myself have walked up to the, well, not walked, but gone up to the health center and forgot, oh boy, I need stamps, right? And I'm sure it's happened to one or two of you around here. Searches. With the information being digitized, it's much easier now to do searches. Some persons, and this is something I learned too, you can actually do searches at the registry. I think it's, right now it's $5 or something, and you could actually do a search. So it's easier to do searches, right? I could now give a name or however their process is, and they can actually do a digital search for you. It'll definitely be much quicker than them having to look through books. I remember in a former life, I sent a page of persons, of names, up to the registry, asking, well, can you tell me if these persons are still alive? And I came back saying, I'm sorry, but no, it's all manual. You have to give us a date or a year or a time or something like that so they can reference it. But with the new digital system, you know, you can just put in the name and see what comes out. Certificates. Yeah, this one is easy. What we want to do is to introduce new, more secure birth certificates. As you know, right now, it's just basically paper with some lines on it. So what we want to do is to introduce a birth certificate that has some security features built in it so that persons can, you know, won't as easily attempt to duplicate them. And finally, just a little bit on the legislation, but I will leave that to one of the next presenters. But part of this whole process is looking at the legislation and making sure that the legislation keeps up with the digitization. So, in summary, and I'm sure y'all are happy I've been brief. In summary, we want to increase payment options, like I said, improve services, searches, faster service, right? When we get the new system, everything is much faster. More secure physical certificates, and I forgot to mention that these certificates actually be printed, so you would actually just print the certificate, they would sign it, and you should be able to get it instead of waiting 5 minutes. It might just cut the time down at the registry from 5 to 2 minutes, but it's time saved, right? And then the legislative changes. So the future improvement, what we want to do, as I mentioned earlier, we want to preserve our books, right? As I said, 1860, that's nearly 150 years old. So we want to preserve them for as long as we can. So that's something that we do have to work on. And I think Mr. Carty mentioned something too with the hospital, especially when it comes to births. You know, you have a digital system now. You don't have to wait to go from the hospital to the registry, right? The hospital can actually register births and, you know, other activities like that. So that was my final slide. So as I said, I'll be here after when we have any questions if you'd like to ask any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation, finding out about the process that goes into this, the registry that we are so used to. I now call on Mr. Sancho Duncan, and he will discuss the electronic identification system, explaining how this secure digital identity platform will enhance access to government services and strengthen data protection. Mr. Duncan.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Sancho Duncan. I work at the Department of Technology as the Enterprise Architect. I'm responsible for the team in the e-government unit that deals with websites, web applications, and technical stuff for government. Welcome, everyone. So I'm here to present on a critical project that we are working on, the EID Digital Authentication Portal, right? This will provide, again, secure access for all citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. It's a transformative and innovative initiative that provides every citizen with secure electronic identity. As the vision states, right, is to create a trusted digital identity ecosystem empowering citizens and enabling a smarter and more connected St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, what is the EID? What is this all about, right? Everybody wants to know what the EID is. So it's a government-issued electronic ID, right, that gives you a unique identifier to uniquely identify every citizen and resident. This would make it easier for governments to identify persons of need. If you have anything that you want to access any government services, make it easier for you to then authenticate yourself to say, I am who I am, and I can access these government services, right? So it gives you a unique identification number, and it also gives you the ability to make it interoperable and being able to exchange data with other ministries and departments, right? And also with the private sector, like with the banks and that type of stuff. So, you know, when you go to apply for a loan, they ask you for 2 government-issued IDs. No, you won't have to do that if you have your EID. You'll be able to authenticate yourself and say, I am Sandra Duncan, I am who I am, I can give my PIN just like you have with your bank cards. You have your PIN number and you can enter it and access your money, right? Same way you'll have your EID card, you'll have your PIN to your EID card, then you'll be able to access and authenticate yourself to access that government data. Okay, how does the EID digital authentication works? Right, first, like any enrollment process, you have to capture the data first, right? So you walk inside of the enrollment office and you capture your data, your picture, your personal information, right, to apply for the EID, right? Citizens can verify themselves both physically or online using different authentication methods, right? Then data is verified against the civil registry and national security databases. As spoken before, some information resides in the civil registry for citizens, and then inside of the the national security databases, we have resident and non-nationals who were born here, right? After the data is verified, then the digital credentials are created and embedded into the smart secure chip, right? The EID is produced and then linked to the citizen profile. Citizens will then be able to authenticate themselves, again, with a PIN or a digital token issued, a one-time password, such as a one-time password, where you can put in your one-time password and authenticate yourself and access the services. Right? I know this is one of the most critical things that everybody wants to speak about, which is the security and the privacy features that is with the EID card. Right? We want to make sure that we have data security and privacy at every level of the system. Therefore, the EID and the digital ID have multiple layers of security, both physically and also in the digital space. So as you can see from the slide we're showing, there is several layers of physical security, such as rainbow print, embossed textures on both front and back, optical variable ink, which uses a special light to read the text on it, right? We have microprints, which up to times 100 zoom, that you can't just read with the naked eye. And then the IKO encrypted magnetic chip, right? Again, it is the same that is used in your bank card when you push it inside of the ATM machines and you put in your PIN to get access to your money. So it's the same chip that this card would have also, which ensures your level of privacy and data security. Also, there are many anti-countering features also embedded in the chip and embedded on the card. So just take a minute to look at that. Okay. Other security and privacy features, of course, we always want to make sure that the citizens and the residents have control over their data, right? So some other data protection features are the encrypted data, multi-factor authentication, of course, again, with the one-time password and your PIN. So just like with your bank cards, you don't give anybody your PIN, which you can also change it as well. Even if somebody get access to your PIN, you can also change your PIN, but you don't want to give people the PIN, just like you don't give people the PIN to your bank cards, you don't give people the PIN to your EID. It's the same concept, right? Again, privacy control, we want the citizens to be able to give consent to who is going to use their data. So if I want, again, bank access to 2 pieces of ID, I can authenticate myself and then give the bank access to 2 pieces of government IDs for me to access a loan or something like that within minutes. So I don't have to go to the bank to physically apply in person. I can apply online using my EID. Again, we want privacy again to to allow transparency for everybody. So there is access logs that you can also see that who is accessing your data and what they're using your data for, right? So that ensures, again, the citizens have that level of transparency with the government so that you can check and see what the government is doing with your applications, et cetera, right? So we just want to speak about some quick benefits to individuals and government. For the citizens, of course, we have reduced identity fraud. So it's harder to copy one of these cards, again, because of all of the security features that is on the card. So you can't just put it in a copier and make a copy of it because of the different layers of security that is on the card, right? It's one ID for all access to government services. And I know people might say, one ID, oh, you have access to all of my information, but that is not how it works, right? The card is actually just an authentication portal for you to say, I am who I say I am. Just like if you walk inside of again, using the passport example, if you walk into the passport office, you would give the passport office, you would fill out an application, you would give the passport office your IDs. So you are authenticating yourself by being physically there in person. We are just creating the same thing in a digital space where you authenticate yourself and give the consent to the passport office, the same as online. You give consent to the passport office to use your information, right? The same way if you want to access your health records, you give access to, grant access to the health records, the health office for you to be able to access your health records. So the information stays in their siloed spaces. So it's not like, again, what the minister says, that you can access every piece of information about myself by just having my PIN. It doesn't work like that, right? So the information remains in their separate databases, and only if I want to use that service, then I would call on that particular service, to get that particular information. But somebody who doesn't have access to that information cannot get access to that information. It's impossible, right? Again, for government, improve service delivery. That's the main goal of the government, to increase, be more efficient. Again, you walk inside of these offices and it's all paper-based. You have to wait so long to get information. We don't want to have that anymore. Again, accurate citizen records and enhanced identity management. Right? So the vision for the future, again, is to have integration between all of the ministries and departments, right? And to have one mobile EID. Can you just imagine government in your hands? You have all of the government in your hands. You're using a single app where I can track all of my applications. I can track all of my payments or anything I do with the government through this mobile app. Again, government in your hands, just imagine. That's my presentation.
Thank you to Mr. Duncan. Next, Crown Counsel Kyle McKechnie will explain the legislative framework supporting these systems, ensuring security, privacy, and accountability across digital platforms.
Good evening, everyone. As mentioned before, I'm here to just present some insight into the legislative framework that is to be enacted and implemented, and the amendments to be made in relation to supporting this digital transformation undertaking. In keeping with the government's Sustainable Island State agenda, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is committed to the passing of new and innovative legislation and legislative amendments to support its comprehensive digital transformation agenda. The proposed laws or legal amendments will give digital systems and transactions legal effect, validity, and ensure proper oversight. But what does this mean? The stage transition from manual, paper-based services to electronic services would enhance service delivery. This transition will enable citizens to access a wider range of services online, reduce or eliminate lines and delays at government offices, and enhance efficiency across both public and private sectors. But why do we need to change laws? Without the right laws, the laws and amendments, the digital transformation initiatives are at risk of being undermined by privacy gaps, security vulnerability, and procedural uncertainty. And so there are a number of proposed legislative amendments which will come in the form of bills, bills will be implemented and amendments will be made to existing legislation in order to ensure that we encapsulate all that the government is trying to achieve. And so we've identified the Digital Identity Bill, the Electronic Transaction Amendment Act, the Civil Registry and Vital Statistics Bill, the Unique Identifier Bill, and the Data Protection Act. The Digital Identity Bill. This bill establishes a system that allows citizens or residents to authenticate their identity digitally and or physically when interacting with government and private services. It enables a single sign-on, streamline access to services. It reduces the duplication or the likelihood of identity duplication and verification across agencies. And it supports trust in digital service delivery and better data integration across government. The Electronic Transaction Act. This provides for the legal recognition of electronic records, signatures, and e-government services. The Electronic Transaction Act is to be amended to keep pace or keep up with the changing digital economy and to facilitate new and secure ways to verify identity online, to support the integration of authentication services across government platforms, and to recognize digital records and documents that have been electronically verified as legally valid. There's a proposed Unique Identifier Bill, and this provides for the creation of a National Identification Authority, the assignment of a unique identification numbers, the issuance of physical and electronic credentials, facilitate real-time authentication of identity, and support mutual recognition of identity across the OECS. Mention has been made of the Civil Registry and Vital Statistics Bill because a lot of the records are still manually stored. And so this will replace the Registration of Births and Deaths and Marriages Act with a new Civil Registry and Vital Statistics Act. And this new act will ensure that every birth, death, every name change, your marriage, adoption, and essentially vital life cycle event is recorded not in the books, but in secure, accessible systems. This will reduce the manual paperwork and improve service delivery of all government. systems. So the Data Protection Act is the other legislation. It must be updated to ensure that the provisions are made for the proper storage and handling of data in relation to the new proposed legislation. And this includes how the data will be stored, what steps persons might be able to take if they have concerns, and it may even address penalties for the misuse of information. And so the object of this act is to safeguard personal data processed by public and private bodies, and it seeks to balance the processing of your data by the bodies in order to do what they're supposed to do, while safeguarding and protecting the personal data from unlawful processing by the same public bodies and private bodies who are given access to your personal data. It is also meant to promote transparency and accountability in the processing of your personal data. So, the transformation of government services depends not necessarily on the technology that's being advanced in order to facilitate the access to services, but it must also include this robust suite of legal documents, laws, acts, bills, supplemented by policies which would give effect to all that the government is trying to achieve. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you to our presenters for outlining how these projects will improve service delivery and safeguard citizens' information. We will now reset the head table for our third and final presentation segment, the project highlights. I invite to the head table Ms. Sandri Elliott, Program Manager at the Digital Transformation Unit, Mr. Christopher Herbert, Program Manager at the Digital Transformation Unit, and Ms. Lyncia Dorr, Change Manager at the Digital Transformation Unit. This segment will highlight and showcase how digital solutions are enhancing trade, citizen engagement, and public sector adaptability. I invite firstly Ms. Elliott, who will present the Trade Single Window Platform, which is a system that streamlines trade by connecting border agencies for faster, more efficient operations. Let's welcome Ms. Elliott.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandri Elliott, and I am one of the program managers in Digital Transformation Unit. And just wish to welcome everyone again. I will be talking about trade single window, saying it's a Nevis trade single window. And it begs the question, what is the trade single window? And as listed by United Nations Trade Facilitation, Recommendation 33, it is a facility that allows parties involved in trade and transport to lodge standardized information, obtain permits and documents with a single entry point to fulfill all import, export, and transit-related regulatory requirements. That's a mouthful, but what it is essentially, it's a single, secure way of customs, traders, brokers, and other government line agencies to perform or accelerate trade. This model was implemented in St. Lucia and Jamaica, and we are adopting it. It's providing a centralized system that connects customs, port authorities, and other regulatory bodies
in those islands. It has significantly reduced clearance times and improved compliance with international trade standards for those two islands. So for decades, we have relied on paper forms. Matter of fact, we've been relying on paper for decades. Paper forms, paper files, paper transactions. But as the world changes, we all know that there's a need. That paper-based systems have many challenges for a lot of stuff, especially trade. And some of those challenges include it creates long lines, lost documents, lengthy clearance times, lengthy clearance times, and increased risks of errors and inconsistency in documentation. And finally, higher operational costs to traders and government agencies, not to mention missed opportunities to have trade enabled with other countries. So therefore, the benefits of the St. Kitts and Nevis trade single window would allow us to perform with the big guys, function in a trade environment that would be faster, provide faster clearance, and reduce processing times, enhance transparency, security, and accountability across, sorry about that. I'm going faster than my slides. So I've been through the challenges where it mentioned lengthy clearance times due to manual document handling, increased risk of errors and inconsistencies in documentation, limited transparency, and increased difficulty in tracking shipments. And finally, higher operational costs for traders and government agencies. Okay, and so to move into what benefits the St. Kitts and Nevis trade single window would provide, number one, you have economic growth, faster clearance and reduced processing times, enhanced transparency, security, and accountability across trade processes. Another one is improved compliance with World Trade Organization and international trade regulations, cost savings for businesses and government agencies, strengthened national competitiveness in regional and global markets. One of the most important benefits I find would be the benefit of trust. The St. Kitts and Nevis trade single window, it's about making life easier and faster and safer for every citizen, business owner, and public servants. Oh, finally, just to sum it up, that the benefits totally outweigh the disadvantages, so therefore, implementing a trade single window will help us to build confidence that when you go online to do business, your information is safe, confidence that your government and local institutions are managing your data with integrity and care, maintaining sovereignty, confidence that as a nation we are prepared to face and defend against cyber threats just like we defend our borders. So by taking cybersecurity seriously, by building into every digital system from the start, we protect not only our data, but our reputation as a trustworthy and forward-thinking country. Thank you.
Thank you to Ms. Elliott for informing us of the Trade Single Window platform. I now invite Mr. Herbert, who will highlight initiatives that enhance citizen interaction with the government, making engagement more transparent and user-friendly.
Hello, good evening all. I trust that you would agree with me that there's value in your being here, that there is indeed a reason why you're here. There is substance in your being here. Before I continue, though, I would have to, of course, acknowledge the members of the first esteemed head table, our Minister of Technology, and of course the lead of the DTU. My purpose this evening is to speak just for a bit into an aspect of digital transformation. My name is Christopher Herbert. And, okay, it should help. My name is Christopher Herbert. I function as a program manager at the DTU, the Digital Transformation Management Unit, or Transformation Unit. You've heard much about technologies this evening, and that's what we do. However, it's critical that you recognize that the core aspect to all of this is not in truth the technology, but the most critical stakeholders are indeed you. And all that's being planned for, all that's our strategies are focused around, the entirety of the CISO is focused on you. My hopefully brief presentation this evening, I've been told that I have challenges with brevity, but I'll attempt, is on enhancing citizen interactions with government. Yes? A key aspect of all that we do, recognizing that behind our technologies are indeed you. And that which steers, that directs all of our technological deployments is indeed understood goal and understood outcome. For this first aspect of the presentation, which will focus on the consumer affairs website and mobile application, our end is advancing governance and service delivery through digital transformation. And so, yes, you will see a website, yes, you will see a mobile application, but there is just a bit more sitting behind that. The first aspect of focus here is increasing information access and improving awareness through digital technologies. You'll recognize that this website is not a typical static website. There are many websites that are well put together and they remain static, unfortunately, for extended periods of time. The information is limited to presentation of news updates and perhaps on occasion a feedback interaction, if there is. The approach that's being deployed in the establishment, maintenance and management of this consumer affairs website is indeed, of course, content managed, but not just indeed content managed. It is indeed structured to ensure that there is a degree of interaction and engagements, and those engagements are adequately monitored, and the necessary analytics are deployed to gain sight of precisely what is the precise interest, use, benefit, most focused space of interaction around the website. Now, this is something that's done typically across commercial websites. However, in some government websites, it falls sadly to the wayside, and what is presented sits in somewhat of a static state for an unfortunate duration of time. There is a definite requirement in this increase of awareness. The content that's placed on this website is based on very well-researched regional, international best practices for consumers. So it's a start. It is indeed a start. That is absolutely slide. There is one slide. To keep me contained with brevity, I was limited to one slide. Okay, so bear with me. So we're at the first bullet point of the one slide. Okay. And I'll try to increase my pace just a bit. You see my challenges? Okay. All right. So some of the aspects, and in truth, I was asked not to even mention this, but it's a consumer affairs website. I'm sorry that I have to step out of place for this just a bit. And while we are speaking about the website, the presentation of the website will not be done in this engagement. Why? We do not want to steal the thunder from the consumer affairs. They're expected to go live before the end of this year. And so you will see the website. What I'm speaking about are some of the functions of the website and how they extend the facilitation of convenience for consumer service transactions. Again, we're starting very, very small with this iteration of the Consumer Affairs website. It's a first rollout of the website, and the intention is to ensure that the necessary people pillar and the building of the resources within the entity grows so that it's able to adequately support the future requirements and the following phases of the deployment of those web platforms. Facilitating convenience of consumer service interaction starts with a grievance and complaints form. Very simple form that enables persons to adhere to their roles and responsibilities as consumers aligned with legislative frameworks. They're able to place their complaints with regards to goods and services provisions that fall well below the necessary requirements. But it's not just done, it's not just ending right there. Typically when persons do this, it sits on a desk forever. In this particular scenario, the data approach, the digital transformation approach ensures that there is further interactions, that there are follow-ups, that persons who have submitted complaints and faults, they can track those complaints and gain sight of precisely where those are to be. Accelerating a bit, all of this speaks to supporting data-driven policies. Currently, the legislative works are indeed in place, but how much of what is on the books is informed by the needs and the requirements of our citizens? Our deployment of technologies that are enhancing citizen interactions are such that your engagements with the applications are key and critical. It starts here this evening where you're just listening and getting your questions in place and determining precisely how could this be better, exactly what do I truly need in a second phase. It starts there. But the idea is, of course, that through your interactions with the applications, that the necessary policymakers gain sight of what are the needs of the most important stakeholders, you. And you'll see finally that it's indeed a cross-platform application, so there are no limitations. I'll go very quickly on this now, as I'm seeing various indicators about my duration. Closing in enhancing citizen interactions is accelerating public sector transformation. I can be very quickly here. Most persons have said it already, that in St. Kitts, nearly all of our government services are sadly manual, they are paper-based. There is limited automation, if any automation at all. There is a use of technologies, but sadly the use of the technologies is largely aligned with traditional forms of doing business with government. And so while there are certain aspects of digitization, there is very limited thrust towards digitalization. And so the way that business is done, the digital-first approach, the mobile-friendly approach is not typically what's at the forefront of many of the services. We expect that a very well-established approach that may seem to be very boring to you, an HR electronic document management system, is indeed a critical foundational pillar or building block towards, I would say, enhancing, furthering the digital transformation across the public service. The expectation here is that those necessary digitization steps are undergirded by a very strong and stout document management platform, which sounds very boring. But it's not just a document management platform. It's an approach that ensures that there is indeed quality information that is collected, contained, described, categorized with necessary metadata that is secured by the necessary multi-factor security access controls, encryption, accountability, ensuring, of course, that there are sufficient time savings through the access of the information, and bearing in mind the key requirement for collaborative approaches and strong interoperability across other systems in the government. It might sound boring, but the reality is, for a person to be onboarded in government, for a person to endure the government for their career, everything from onboarding to transfers, thank you very much, sir. Transfers from department to department, right across, so other leaves and retirement. The duration for these processes are sadly laborious, and it leads persons with sometimes 6-month processes, 6-month duration times for what you would expect to be simple processes. And this is not pointing a finger of blame at HR. The HR grouping of gents and ladies work very hard. However, their manual, non-digitized, non-workflow enabled approaches towards document management has hindered their ability to indeed be transformed by the digital technologies. However, in our attempts, we are seeking to build the necessary digital frameworks. I mentioned before security, time savings, easy collaboration, improved compliance. We expect that these frameworks would be built out. In fact, this application has taken quite a considerable step forward, and we expect that it would be our first building block towards the scaling towards ubiquitous, impactful digital deployments. It starts here. It starts here, and we trust that it will extend well beyond. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you to Mr. Herbert for being so very brief. We appreciate your efforts. We'll now call on Ms. Lindsay Adore to close this segment, and she will discuss change management, emphasizing how guiding teams and fostering adaptability ensures the sustainability of our digital initiatives.
Good evening, everyone. So like Chris, I will be very brief. Okay, so tonight I'm here to talk about change management. Now, we may ask, what is change management? Change management is essentially helping individuals to adapt to new technology and systems. So as you can see from the picture, it's bridging the gap. So currently we are paper-based with the ECRS, which is the electronic registry system. So now we are trying to move to the digital. So my goal here is to ensure that the public, citizens and residents have clear and timely messages, that we collect feedback and gather support, and we address any concerns that the public may have, and that we will also monitor progress and make adjustments. For example, if when we roll out the new digital for the ECRS, if the public is saying that it's too hard, they're not getting how to work the system, then that is where we come in, that we would make adjustments to the system to ensure that everybody is able to log on and have no issues. Now, why is training so important in change management? One, it builds awareness and understanding. It increases adoption and engagement, and it strengthens leadership and communication. With the training, it will provide awareness, it would increase your skill set, and you would have the knowledge to ensure that you are aware of what is happening. So our overall goal is to ensure that citizens and residents have the ability to ensure that we educate everyone in the processes and new technologies that we are about to roll on stream. At the Digital Transformation Unit, we are committed to clear and timely communication, training, and tools for success, opportunities for stakeholders to give input, just like tonight we are here, and to provide stakeholders with any support that may need. So, was that brief enough? Thank you so much.
Thank you to Ms. Dorr. And now we will move into our interactive question and answer segment. We will switch up the head table once again. Thank you so much. And we will call on Honorable Congress Maynard and Mr. Nigel Catty to sit at the head table as we invite the public to ask questions. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your opportunity to ask questions and share feedback. Please approach the microphone with your questions. At this time, we limit questions to 2 per person in the first instance.
Good evening, everyone. The Minister and the former Minister, I'm just wondering, this initiative, is it mandated by the United Nations under its Agenda 2030 program, or is it something indigenous, or something that is organized by the OECS or CARICOM? Because I'm aware that at the moment, there's a meeting in Doha, which is designed to enhance worldwide acceptance of digital IDs with a very sinister ulterior motive, which would be to control people's movements, people's assets, limit people's freedom, as it were. And it has a lot to do with digital IDs. So I'm just wondering if what's happening here is a part of that mandate, or is it something that is strictly homegrown? And before I take my seat, also, we learned a long time ago that if anything sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So I would like you to explain to us what are some of the dangers that are involved in this program, because I'm sure it can't be all nice and dandy.
All right, thank you very much for the question. And firstly, let me thank everyone for being here. I am pleased to see that there is a level of interest in this particular initiative. Now, with respect to your question, there's no mandate by the UN or by any government or any institution or any body that I'm aware of that is forcing St. Kitts and Nevis to digitally transform its government. This was actually one of the commitments made by the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party administration in its campaign, where it said that we need to improve the ease of doing business with the government. And in order to do that, we have to transform our government. In fact, on the trail, the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party administration became the first campaign, I believe, to actually digitize its manifesto and created an app so that you can follow it digitally and it can be updated accordingly, etc. So this is an indigenous part of what we call our Sustainable Island State Agenda, where we believe that it is critical for us to transform our government and the way that we collect, store, and manage data so that we can become much more efficient, we can become more transparent, you can have more control over the information that is your information, and to overall increase the ease of doing business in St. Kitts and Nevis. So I am not aware of any mandate of any sort, and we are a sovereign nation, and so our decisions are for us to make going forward, and that is why it's important to have you here, to have the important questions asked, so that we can address those concerns and learn where we need to learn to ensure that the citizens are comfortable with what we are doing, and we understand all the benefits and all, as you said, the potential drawbacks. Now, with respect to the second part of your question, and maybe Honorable Catty would come in on this as well, with every system I mean, no one can tell you that everything is going to be 100% perfect. It just doesn't happen. And you're right if someone were to say that this is 100% perfect, then you must be wary of it. But we have to try to get to that near perfection. And there are things that we can do and policies and so on that we can do to allow this to happen. That is why it should not be a piecemeal approach, but we must look at everything, not just the people transformation, not just the process transformation, not just the technology transformation, but the legislative and framework transformation as well. So that in the event something happens, there is a mechanism for us to address it. Now, as we increase in technology, etc., it actually becomes much more difficult to manipulate digital data than it is data on paper. For instance, right now, if someone goes and takes your information off of paper, you can have no idea of that. But in digital systems, for instance, there is always a log, there is always a trace, there's always a way to find what happened or who accessed the information. So someone like you, for instance, or us in this situation, we will be able to see in a system like this what whomever is doing with our information. We are the ones who have to give consent to use this information. And that is why it is so critical that we do it, and we do it correctly, and to build the trust with you, the public, that we are taking this seriously and that you can depend on us. Right now, of course, the government has all of this information already. The information exists in all of these institutions already, right? And maybe this is a good time where I can just stress this about your question, what if something goes wrong? We visited Estonia a couple years ago to look at their example situation, the example of their process. Now, they had taken, coming out to the 90s and so on, they actually took a number of years to get where they are, but they are world leader. And so we were able to have a look at their system. One of the things that stood out to me there is because they were almost the first to be doing it, they didn't start out with Estonia trying to build an e-digital identity system from scratch. It actually happened over time. And what happened is a similar experience to what we have in St. Kitts and Nevis. Many different areas of Estonia had already started developing their own digital processes. So you had records in this place, you had records in that place, you had services in this place, and what you had was a number of silos. So information was here, information was there. And one of the things that they decided to do when they were building the system is not to centralize all of that information so that it is easily accessible by one targeted attack. Instead, they left it in silos, strengthened those silos, and created what is called an interoperability layer. So you can only, if for instance someone were to, God forbid, get access to one set of information, that is what they got access to, just that, instead of the whole system. So that is the same approach that we are taking here, where we are not creating a centralized place that holds all of the information. So Inland Revenue will have its information, Customs will have its information, Social Security will have its information, health records will have its information. We will secure and protect those with the additional layers, the cybersecurity, etc. But we will have an authentication layer now, an interoperability layer, that allows or gives permission to access the data that is necessary for whatever transaction you are doing. So I know I was a bit of a Chris Herbert just now, but I took the opportunity to put everything in perspective here. Thank you.
Could I just add one point to what the minister said? Mr. Blake, I think I understand how you're thinking with the question you asked. The fact that there are other countries who are doing what we're doing, and the fact that there are organizations such as the OECS and CARICOM and UN and so on advocating and encouraging doesn't mean that we're on their mandate. I got a cell phone because I saw other people using a cell phone. I recognized the value in a cell phone. This was way back in 2003, thereabout. And so I began to use it, not because I was under a mandate, but I saw the value in moving in that direction. The other thing, the last question you asked, anything we do has risk to it. And as government puts more and more of its digital assets online or expose more and more of its assets digitally, there is the need for us to bear in mind the beef of our cybersecurity posture. So it comes with various considerations.
Good night. So beyond this cybersecurity, what comprehensive safeguards, such as redundancy systems, disaster recovery protocols, and physical infrastructure protections are being implemented to ensure the resilience of the digital identity data against things like natural disasters, power outages, and other environmental threats?
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. I think you raised some very important concerns. I just finished answering the last question by saying that as government exposes more and more of its assets digitally, then we need to take on board the idea of cybersecurity. We need to take that much more seriously. Not that it has not been taken seriously, but it's just that we have to redouble our efforts and make sure that we have the best strategies surrounding cybersecurity. But the minister also made reference to a while ago of distributed systems, not having all of your data in one place, but having systems, various systems storing data. And you also raised a very important point of redundancy, data redundancy. These are strategies that we are already using, but we will have to sort of make sure that we double our efforts in that regard. For example, a number of systems that government has. We have systems that are operating locally, so we have local database, whatever have you. We have private cloud and government, but we also use public cloud, so there's a redundancy there. As well as you can have redundancy within our borders, but in different locations, and that is what we're doing. One of the important things as well is that we recognize that we need to create a safer place for the storage of government data systems. Where we are, we recognize that we need to improve on that. And last year, the minister asked us to begin to approach one of our development partners to see if we can secure some assistance for the building out of a new, modern data center.
I would want to add something to that as well. I want to thank you for that very good question. I'll start off with an example. I hear a number of people often say, oh, my phone crashed, and so I don't have your number anymore. I've lost the numbers. Can you give me back the number? And I always smile when that happens. Because right now, if my phone is stolen, God forbid, if my computer systems are totally crashed up, God forbid, if we go through an unfortunate natural disaster, I am almost confident that I will lose 0 of my data. Why? Because digital transformation allows us this opportunity to safeguard the information and create the necessary redundancies that go along with it. Now, on a regional level, we have also been discussing this at, say, the Caribbean Telecommunication Union. And talks are also advanced into how we can, in the Caribbean, provide some of that redundancy that we need. So Trinidad, for instance, is building a number of data centers such that we can partner with them, especially they being in the southern part of the Caribbean, probably less likely to have serious weather events that can breach the integrity of wherever that is. So we are in those discussions about how we will partner as Caribbean nations to not only host our data and secure our data as a sovereign nation, but how can we support each other by providing the necessary redundancy for the information. So all of this is part of the what we are moving towards, where digitization will create redundancy copies. As the Chief Digital Transformation Officer said, that I forgot what I was going to say that you said, but we are at this is all part of what we're doing in terms of making sure that we have digital, he was saying that there are local cloud services and also global cloud services that we use. So this is also going to be part of our strategy to ensure that we have the necessary redundancy that we like. So I want to encourage persons that don't lose your phone and lose your information. There are very simple technologies that exist that can secure your information, and we need not be afraid because this offers us the opportunity to recoup them. I want to throw my hat out right now to the people of Jamaica, of course, and Cuba. I don't know if, and Bahamas, it passed to the Bahamas for the horrific natural disaster that went through their parts of their country. On the southwestern end of Jamaica has been decimated, and God forbid that anyone had critical information that was only in that situation, that will be completely lost. And digitization, digital transformation allows us an opportunity to create that type of redundancy.
Good evening. Okay. Minister Maynard and my good friend, Mr. Carty here. My main thing is access and accessibility for persons with disabilities.
It's probably, I think we're being streamed and so on the radio, so it's probably a good thing to identify yourself and if you're representing an organization, if you would like.
My name is Anthony Mills. I'm the current president for the St. Kitts Nevis Association of Persons with Disabilities. And so you would expect that I'm concerned about how these systems would be accessible to people with disabilities. Let's look at somebody who's blind and need to use screen readers. Currently, a lot of the websites are not coded for screen readers because our vice president is totally blind. And I hear him complain about sometimes when he goes on some of these websites and then the screen reader would say like button 47. That does not give him no information to work with if it's a button 47. So you would have to make sure that these buttons are coded in such a way that when he get the button, it would say what the button is. And the links are coded in such a way so that they would work for this. The screen reader wouldn't just see the text, but he would see the links and he would know where the links lead to. So my concern is what is being done to ensure that these systems are fully accessible to persons with disabilities, not just persons who are blind, but persons who are deaf, and you have videos on there to ensure that they always have caption. And then I'm not sure which one of you spoke about government can harness information for planning. I would suggest that would be a good time now to collect data on persons with disabilities, because currently we know that the last survey that was done, the data was lost. And there was no survey being done since. So currently we can only estimate that there's about 10 to 15% of the population that lives with disabilities. So now that we are doing this digital transformation thing, it would be a good time to collect the data so we'll know exactly, well, if we have 50,000 people living in both islands, at 5,000, 7,500 people living with disabilities, what the type of disabilities have, where they live. And this not only helps with what you're doing here, but it also helps in terms of disaster preparedness. So persons with disabilities can be evacuated. You would know what type of evacuation needs they have. So this would be a good time. So I would like to address those two things, the accessibility that is being built into the system and the harnessing of the information.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mills. That's a very important question. A significant component of digital transformation is inclusivity, right? So we're talking about being able to build systems that are responsive to the needs of all sorts of people. People with disabilities of whatever kind, the elderly and so forth. Let me give you an example. One of the considerations that was raised when we were talking about the production of new certificates at the ECRS, the Basta Health Center. One of the colleagues, I think it was Eric, the idea of on the certificate. He said we would have to have a conversation with a group such as yours and see how we could advance that. It is just that we are not at that phase yet because there's so much work to be done before we can get to that stage. We thought we'll focus on that. But that conversation is critically important. The other thing I want to mention is that one of the things that Christopher would have sought to address in his very brief presentation was that as we design systems, we are taking those very considerations in mind. So we are spending a lot of our time focusing on how the user interface is presented so that people who have visual impairment issues and so forth can use that. But we've also embarked on getting some consultancy done in relation to web standards. You know, we are a small unit. We have a lot of skilled people, highly skilled people in the department and in the unit, but we believe that this is an area of specialization where we bring somebody in. How can we develop applications that are responsive to the needs of people with varying abilities? So that is top of mind for us.
Okay. You spoke about consultation, but what about ensuring that when these systems are being built, you not only consult with the people who does the technical stuff, but also the end user, like the person with the disabilities. We feel, when you say no one left behind, we as people with disability also says nothing about us without us. So what's being done to ensure that you not only consult with but you consult with the people with the disabilities, because we kind of know what works for us.
Right.
So, you know, if you consult with us, we can tell you, well, whether this would work or that wouldn't work, or how you can kind of tweak it.
Right, so consultation is ongoing for us. This is one of them, but we are going to have specific consultation sessions when we develop or in the process of developing specific systems. So we will continue to do that.
Thank you very much for that question. I also want to give the commitment that we will ensure that any system that we are building is going to be compliant with the needs of persons with disabilities. And I'm thanking you for that question and to make sure that it is on the forefront of the members of the DTU. Now, you asked about harnessing of the information. One of the other projects that we're working on is the National Addressing System. So where everyone will have, or every property rather, would have a defined specific address system. So if the Ministry of Persons with Disabilities, for instance, keeps a database of 1,500 persons with disabilities, and through that database, we can know exactly where you are, then it is easy for the government to then quickly dispatch support to that specific area. And all of that happens because we're doing this digital transformation. Right now, obviously, we can't do that in any grand scale now because the information does not exist to hand. But by doing this digitization process, by doing the national addressing system, by having your ID or your unique identifier linked to an address, social services or Ministry of Persons with Disabilities or whichever other social service the government has can easily pinpoint where we need to send support to persons who need it at the time.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Anthony Rollins. I'm also a member of the St. Kitts and Nevis Association of Persons with Disabilities. My question is, would you all be doing any specific training for persons with disabilities to know how to operate these systems? I mean, the digital transformation is great, yes, but then a lot of persons with disabilities are a little bit slower than most people. So would you all be doing any training for persons with disabilities to get to understand and to utilize these systems? Another question is, after this digital transformation is fully incorporated, a lot of people are going to lose jobs. No? How about those ladies working in the thing? All those ladies working by the health center, none of them are going to lose their jobs. It's because, now my reason for this being, after you done do that, you ain't going to want everybody. You check what I'm saying? So, I mean, you know, you could say no, but later down the road, that's what's going to happen.
So perhaps I could start with the last question, and then you could probably come in on the first question. Right, so obviously the intent is never for persons to lose jobs. We always get this concern whenever we are transitioning to some advanced technology. It has always been there. But what an increased digital economy means is that there is going to be opportunity for the creation of so many more jobs, right? And so you will almost always have what is a net benefit. Because now that the government can operate faster and smoother, there are going to be other things that have to happen. And so the government is always going to be conscious that our effort here is not to, by any stretch of the imagination, reduce jobs, but to create new jobs for the digital economy, create new jobs in energy, create new jobs in agriculture, create new jobs across all of the sustainable pillars for everyone, including persons with disabilities. So I am glad that you're here this evening to make sure that it remains on the top of our agenda. And absolutely, there will be training for everyone to be able to use the systems that we will be implementing. And I also think that we should probably have some strong mandate or strong request for when the private sector is developing solutions that they also incorporate savings, because this is not just about the government, it is also about the private sector. So for instance, the bank that you go to will now have digital services because of this digital ecosystem that has been created. We want to make sure that they also ensure that the people who are going to be using their systems have the requisite training so that it is efficient for them and the business at the same time.
I asked Chris to make a short statement about WCAG in terms of caring for people with disabilities, what we're doing there. And I'm also going to ask Lindsay Doe to make some statements about training. She's our change management person. She also has specialization in working with people with disabilities and so on. So if we can have them make very brief. Chris, brief statement.
Okay, just very briefly. Our reality is that much of our web presence has been done with very high intentions, yeah? And so the systems have been excellently built. What we have recognized, however, is a very distinct need for adherence to standards. A current RFP, current consultation tender process ongoing right now speaks specifically to that. The WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, is one of the key aspects that we've recognized speaks specifically to what you are referring to. And unfortunately, in some of the web presences across the government in some applications, those standards have not been adhered to. While other standards, data and information security, the ISO, IEC 27000 series, those have been adhered to. So the redundancies and so forth, yes. But we've recognized through these sorts of interactions as well as our research that these are standards that are absolutely critical. Our most recent approach is to establish a website, well, to seek to establish a website framework, standards framework, a checklist, including as well a digital services library that we are seeking to establish to ensure that all of our applications and web presences going forward are indeed adherent to all of the relevant standards for our population here in St. Kitts.
Mr. Mills, thank you so much for raising that question. So we'll be providing training with the St. Kitts Nevis Association of Persons with Disabilities in collaboration with the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Aging and Disability. So we'll all be working together to ensure that you receive, everyone in the association and beyond receive the training that will be needed.
Sorry, I gave up my space to Mr. Martin, so I'll take it now. Thank you. Good night, Emily Tawana Paul, teacher, and maybe chaplain for the night. There are several questions that I needed to ask, but they were answered along the way. And I'm happy that you bring up the one about defined addresses. Because one of the things I find in us as Kittitians, we move very often. So if we are going to develop a digital space, are we going to do some control as people don't just move back and forth? I live in Sandy Point in January, and by the time August is there, I am now in Bastille or I'm in St. Peter's. I know in some other countries you have to register your movement. So I'm not so sure if that is going to be part of your digital space. Also, from what I'm hearing, what's the launch time frame?
Okay, quickly on that. So one, there is no intent or discussion about registering persons' movement. That is not something that I think, there's no discussion about that. So, but obviously if you move, then you are able to update your address, which means then that any service that you go and get, it will be tied to that address. So when you present to SCELEC, for instance, you will have the proper address. That's one thing that provides a particular problem for us because we don't have a national addressing system. SCELEC may have one address for you. Another institution will have another address for the same place for you. And another institution has another address and it's the same place for you. But because we don't have any standardized national addressing systems, you have 3 addresses for you, one on your driver's license, one on something else, and one. What this will do is to now standardize that. So your present or current address, if that is what that particular service provider requires, and you give them consent by providing your PIN or what have you, then they will access what is your current address. The other thing in terms of launch and time frame, so this is an ongoing process. Digital transformation is not a do everything and you launch on this date. So it is an ongoing process. So a number of these processes are in train and have started. We are now in the process stage of engaging the public to get your feedback because we're going to get into the time frame where we have to make some firm decisions like changing legislation, etc. Right. So the legislation will come as they are ready and as we have done our consultations with the different stakeholders. I would let Honorable Cathy perhaps speak on the digital EID, because that has some time frames in it where we can gauge when you will be able to have and start, when we might be able to start issuing the actual digital ID card.
You think you can say something about the EID, time frame and so on?
Okay.
So the EID is currently in development. It's expected to be launched, assuming everything goes right, by about mid of next year. That is the expected time frame on that. Of course, you know, once we get everything right, it'll be very good. But that's approximately the time frame on that right now. We have equipment which it's on Syncits already. So we are going to be doing some testing with that over the next two, three months. Then we probably do some trial runs, make sure everything is good. And once that is all settled, then hopefully by June, roughly about June of next year, we should have the EID. So just look out for it about that time. But during this time, we also need to engage other stakeholders like the banks, bring people on board, and they would also add substance to the whole EID and the whole EID system. Thanks.
There is not any position yet in terms of any cost for the EID. That we're not at that stage yet to determine. I am not sure what the recommendation would be. I presume that in the very beginning there probably will not be any cost associated with it. But then if you have to replace because of damage and loss and so on, then is when costs might come into play.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Laverne Berkeley, and I'm representing Uplift.
Representing?
Uplift.
Oh.
Internet is the foundational platform, and key enabler of digital transformation. Currently in this federation, we experience very poor internet service. Is the government going to change that? And how is the government planning on resolving this issue? Two things I want to speak of that I encountered recently. One, it was after the introduction of the Inland Revenue Department SMART, where they allowed me to file my taxes online and pay for it, as they say, in the comfort of my home. I started the process, got knocked off in the middle, tried again, and when it reached the payment process, it is still loading. I had to reach to Bastille to make that payment. Two, I traveled, I came back to the Federation, and on entering the airport, the new system is in place, and the lot of, my thing is, in the aim of lessening paper, lessening frustration, what is the plan for internet? Because it seems like we already have a very burdened internet system or service.
All right, thank you for that question. And I hope I don't get too technical here in the response. What you explained there does not necessarily sound like an internet problem, but an application problem, right? So there's a difference. Not because something is loading means that the internet is the challenge. You would have had to also lose service elsewhere, meaning your phone could not connect on you, or you couldn't search on another website, etc., to know if it was internet related. So that's a difference there between the internet and the app. Now, this is why it is important for what the Digital Transformation Unit is pursuing now with respect to the recent tender that they put out for standardization of internet programs, protocol, websites, etc., so that every department that builds or is seeking to build an application would follow certain standards that are known and trusted and verified by the department or some policy that we have. So sometimes these are development kinks in applications that probably could be resolved, but maybe because certain standards weren't adhered to or the way it was implemented may have had a challenge, etc. So that is part of what the Digital Transformation Unit is doing by setting up the standards so that anything that is developed uses standards that we know can work. So that is what I would say on the smarts. What you mentioned. The other thing is, internet service in St. Kitts and Nevis is provided by, I think, 3 service providers now. Flow. Well, Nevis, I think Digicel provides Nevis. Flow, the cable, and city Wi-Fi. Generally, compared to elsewhere, even in the region, the St. Kitts Nevis internet experience is fairly good, right? And we would probably, I know some persons are shaking, etc., shaking your heads. I would encourage you to make sure you bring this up with your service provider, right? And that, I am going to bring this to the attention of, which is the NTRC, which is the body responsible for ensuring that telecom companies are adhering to the best practices and have the minimum downtimes and access times at their maximum to ensure that we pay attention to this. But in general, we should I want to tell you, go and knock on the door of your service provider to ensure that they are giving you what you're supposed to be getting in your area. And if you do have an actual challenge in your area and your service provider seems unable to resolve that, I would encourage you to report that to our NTRC so that they can then do an assessment for that area.
We'll take the last 2 questions.
It's about 4 of them.
Oh, the last 3 questions. We'll take from the last 3 persons.
Okay, good night.
No, I don't think 3 yet. I think there are some other questions.
Okay.
Okay,
we'll continue the conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, good night. A lot of emphasis has been placed on cybersecurity. And obviously, it's very important to protect our information. But I'm wondering, or I'm suggesting, if it's not already in the works, to build capacity in database management itself. Because we don't want a fully secure system and it still struggles internally, where we have duplicated records, mismatched information, or missing information altogether. So I was wondering, when we are putting the emphasis on the cybersecurity, if there's going to be emphasis on database management, especially when we're talking about interoperability. We have each department, etc., with their own database. That itself becomes cumbersome when we're talking about the integration across the Federation. So I'm just putting a plug for database management, scholarships, certifications, etc.
Is that your field? Okay.
So I think the questions we are getting show how engaged people are on these subject matters. But data standards
is something that we are highly focused on. And I think as Chris or Eric would tell you, we have a consultancy out right now in that area. What we do recognize at the DTMU and in the Ministry of Technology generally is that we know that for certain types of advice, we really need consultants who are deep in the particular area because we're developing systems for our government, not for our own selves. And so we have identified those areas, cybersecurity, web standards, data and information management, as areas in which we want consultancy support, and we reached out and are working to resolve those. And of course, the training would be necessary because we are setting up, the minister will tell you, the minister just approved recently that we move forward with the establishment of our cybersecurity unit, also with our data and information management unit. So that means that we need people with those skills in that unit. All right? So we're looking for people who are qualified. We're also looking to provide in terms of training so that they can be self-sustaining in having those skill sets coming forward.
Good evening. So I had a few questions, but since I'm limited to two, just to partially piggyback on something Mr. Blake mentioned. He mentioned that, sorry? Oh, James, sorry. James, Mr. James. Just to partially piggyback on what he said, he spoke about the digital ID being a part of the UN's SDGs, and I think it was 16.9 where they said that digital ID would be legal IDs, and then also, I may remember who said it, but somebody spoke about the country consulting Tony Blair Institute. Tony Blair is known to be a member of the World Economic Forum, and the digital IDs and cashless societies are part of the Great Reset that the World Economic Forum is pushing towards. That's one. That's just piggybacking on what he said. But now the question is, the laws, the legal pass, the laws, the amendments, would them be made available to the public before they're ready in Parliament so that we could peruse them and probably give objections to what is in the bills or the amendments?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Let me start with the last one. The minister has made sure. So one of the bills that we have done a lot of work on and have had consultancy support in developing is the Electronic Identity Bill. We had support from the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, where they were able to provide us with an expert in drafting legislation of that kind. We went through over a year of consultations, consulting with banks, ordinary people, and so on. We had a number of consultation sessions. If Ophelia were here, she would give more information on that, but we have had extensive consultation on that. For others that we are now getting into, we still have some consultation to do. So we have conceptualized these drafts, but then we'll be going through a consultative process to ensure that we can get your views on those things.
So when you say consultation, there would be consultation, I mean like more town halls pertaining to
No. Town halls are one way of doing certain things, but we want to be able to sit down around a table with people, go through the actual specifics of the law so that people can tell us. So if we are doing something, say on, let's say, digital ID, then we want people who have an interest, people who have training, people who have whatever,
expertise,
to come to the table, sit down with us as we go through the legislation, draft legislation, paragraph by paragraph, section by section, and get people's feedback on that. We have done that with the EID bill, the digital ID bill, and we are yet to do that with some of the drafts that we have. We have a draft, then we'll go out with a draft, and hopefully
so the drafts will be made available to the
yes,
general
absolutely.
public that we could peruse and
absolutely,
give us
absolutely,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
The other question you asked or comment you made was in relation to the UN section, whatever, about digital ID.
Yeah. Sorry.
Legal identity.
Legal identity,
not digital.
Right. Legal. Right. It's legal identity. It's legal identity. That's because there is a concern that there are people living in many countries around the world who don't have any legal identity at all. So they're in the shadows. People can take them, enslave them, do whatever they want to do with them, and nobody knows of their existence. Now, digital ID is just one way of achieving that, but there is no mandate in relation to digital ID being used to create legal identity.
Sync is currently basically heading towards some of those different goals, because I think these are 17, 18 in all, and we're pushing towards different ones as we progress. Like, for instance, the video said that you would launch it this month, the electronic vehicles, something, may remember the policy.
EV?
Yeah, but in a policy where they're asking us to replace the fleet from gas power, diesel power to electronic vehicles. So that's all of those are part of the UN SDGs. And that's why I say, I understand Mr. Blake's concern, because this leads to my second question, which is how would, so how are you going to make the public feel safe and secured with digital ID? Meaning, around the world, UK, I think there are almost 3 million or over 3 million now of people signing petitions against digital ID. In Australia, I think they had protests recently. In India, they launched the digital ID already, but they have had leaks over the years of people's digital information. As recent as the 9th of last month, India digital ID information was found on the internet for sale. So that's one. And in Pakistan, they had a protest about digital ID. Using geofencing, the government was able to identify who was present by the cell phones. And then through the digital IDs, they were basically, for the lack of a better word, penalized or targeted. Some of them wasn't able to access like banks, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them wasn't able to access government services and those kind of things. So how we as citizens, seeing all this going on now, don't feel comfortable with now this coming at your doorstep. If like somebody implied, I don't remember if Mr. Blake, but this feels like, basically the war is closing slowly but surely, and we would have to comply. During COVID, we had to comply, but because, for example, during COVID, they refused the vaccine for whatever reasons. But they were the bank, et cetera, they go for money, they couldn't access it, et cetera, et cetera. With digital ID and cashless society, it would be way easier to basically put somebody on lockdown. So how, with all of that going on in the world, and we could see all of that going on in the world, how would we feel comfortable entering a system like that, knowing that somebody could co-opt with the system and do that? Because during COVID, basically, Sinkis was co-opted to deal with them totalitarian system that what happened to us during that time. People lost jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, you can see some again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And those are very important questions. And that is why it is important to have forums like this so that we could have an opportunity to hear those questions and address them appropriately. I would probably start off by saying there was a time when there were no cars on the road, and you had to walk or maybe go by buggy. And then somebody decided that we're going to get a motor car. And that car now has become an attack machine, because I can take that same car, which was designed for the purpose of something purely good, and cause havoc. Any tool or any machine you could think of is like that. So if we use that same thing, we as humans can almost use anything that is meant for good, also for bad. But how do we deal with those particular situations where a government can do something that is bad to its people? Now, St. Kitts and Nevis prides itself on something called the rule of law. The rule of law. And that is why these things are important. So when you bring a question like, for instance, a government being able to take information and penalize someone, we can legislate against things like that. But I'm saying right now it is not legal for the government to do certain things. The government is therefore not doing it. We live in a part of the world where we expect that the government will abide by the rule of law. Because with or without a digital ID, with or without some of these services, a horrible government can decide, God forbid, to show up in here and withhold all of us against our will. But we expect that our country has reached to the point where civility will be at the forefront and the rule of law will maintain. So it is important. I'll go back a little bit on this. When I was in university doing a master's in electrical and computer engineering and AI and all of these different things, do you know what they had to teach us as any computer scientists? They had to teach us how to break the system. Because if we don't know how to break the system, how then can we design to protect against it? So this exercise is so very critical and important because I want the departments to hear all of the ways that you think we can break the system so that what? We can design as much as possible to prevent it via legislation, via policy, via frameworks. Because we will always have that inherent fear of somebody doing something bad to us. But what we can do is to prepare ourselves. So don't keep it in your back pocket. Those of you listening at home and so on, if you have identified situations around the world where any system like this can be used for wrong, we want to know about it because we want to be able to design and prevent those things from happening. But the benefits, in our estimation, way outweigh the negatives because that same information that you have that people are using erroneously can also provide so much relief and efficiency for the government. And what is going to be critical, I think also it's important, Jamaica, for instance, went through this exercise as well. And people had the concern about their private data and information. And so Jamaica actually passed a very strong Data Protection Act back in 2020, which I've asked the unit to go through in detail to identify what strengths in that particular piece of legislation we can bring here. And one of the core principles in there is that you have control over your information and that the information can't be used against you. And if anybody tried to use that information, you have a way to do it. And obviously, you can't stop all bad actors. People will try, but we want to put the mechanisms in place to do it. So I welcome those types of questions because sometimes they were, sorry for going on a little longer, once in a meeting, I don't remember if it was with ICT or with Post, they indicated to me a nefarious act that somebody was doing. And it never occurred to me that somebody would think to do something like that, right? It never occurred to me. But they were able to say, look, no, this is what happened. So what happened after that? We're now able to plan so that we could thwart that. So this is very, very important. I want to thank you for those questions, and I want persons to bring that information. You also said, you asked about the consultation with respect to any legislation. I'll give the commitment as the Minister of ICT to ensure that once the legislation is ready, that one, of course, we will do our previous consultation, but we will give enough time for there to be amendments that are legitimately proposed. Right now, a lot of persons don't realize that because of our system, I am not only a Minister of Government, but I'm also a legislator. and I'm a representative of Parliament. So the reality is, your representative should always make themselves available to be able to get your input on bills and legislation that they are going to pass. And how we do that is, when we pay attention to the process, there's usually a first reading of the bill in Parliament. I don't know if you know what happens for a first reading. Nothing passes. It is just read for the first time in Parliament. After that, there's usually a time before it is read a second time in Parliament. During that first time it is read, and you hear about it, because that has to be public information, we have to announce that it has been read a first time. You make sure that you get a copy of that legislation. If it is not widely available, make sure you inquire about it, get a copy, and ensure. But I am going to give my commitment that for these bits of legislation, we're going to make sure that they are available through maybe the websites, etc., so persons can review and make the necessary suggestions. And after that, there's the second reading, and then it goes to what is the stage where we can make amendments to it. So if you, for instance, between the first reading and second reading, identified something that was absolutely critical and you drew it to our attention and we agree with your position and so on, then in the process we can then amend what is in the draft legislation. When you say besides SKNIS, what? Right. Okay, that's a good question. And as I said, I'm giving the unit the blessing now that, especially when it comes to these, that those bills are available, the draft bills are available on the websites associated with the Digital Transformation Unit and the Ministry of ICT.
Good night. I'm Dion Gomes, a resident of this community, Ponce Pasture. I would like to say, given the information that I received tonight, I'm very, 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 very much elated. Like yourself, Minister Maynard, I do keep my stuff at the tip of my finger. When I go to various institutions, I can pull my phone, email, WhatsApp, whatever documentation I need. So if I lose my phone, I can retrieve them. I might not have an iPhone like yours, but I still have the ability to do that. Now, over the years, I have envisioned a lot of these things being put in place here in St. Kitts, just what being mentioned here. I'm not just hearing digital ID, but I'm hearing digital transformation. As a young entrepreneur, and as a licensed custom broker, I've gotten frustrated of some cumbrous and robust processes having to go through and having to deal with certain people in persons or institutions. You go to them in person, and the demeanor and the tone that you receive is such a toned off. But I just grind my teeth and just go through it and get the process done. So again, I'm very much elated, and I'm looking forward for this to be rolled out, to come to fruition, so I can get things done to the tip of my finger. I have structured, as a small business, I have structured my services at the tip of your finger, where I have a website, and you can do so many things. I went to the bank, I opened an account, you can charge a card, you got a link, just name it. And I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you so much, and I want to say kudos to yourself, the department, and all the workers who have put this effort together to come here and enlighten the public. And I want to tell them to keep on pushing to have this thing rolled out. Thank you so much.
I think there's a line behind there, so perhaps. I know, but perhaps you should stand in the line so that or indicate which position.
Good evening. My name is Schneidman Warner. First question, will there be, or could I implore that there be an oversight body, an independent oversight body, to ensure that the goals that this process hopes to achieve and the actual implementation be met and be done in a way where both the users, meaning we the citizens, and the persons in charge, meaning the state, would be equally well represented and not one taking advantage of another. Secondly, in spite of the fact you said that this thing will be done over a long period of time, which is quite understood. Do you have, however, any indication as to what is the anticipated cost of this project? How much money do you expect to spend over the period of the project? Citizen consent. What form will this take? And is it going to be like when I download some software and there are 40 pages of things I have to agree with? And if I disagree with one paragraph and I say no, I can't use it at all. What form will this citizen consent take? Will there be consultation? Okay, yes. I trust that the consultation that you'll be undertaking will be real consultation. I'll give you an example of an occasion when I saw it in practice. When in this very building, some years ago, there was a forum like this one for the change of the property tax system. Someone got up and raised an issue with one of the methodologies that was going to be employed to let people know about their valuations. And in that room, there was wide agreement that that person felt how most people felt. And to the credit of the powers that be, they took hearing of it and changed the plan because it was quite obvious that the state seemed to be overstretching its bounds in the opinion of the people concerned. Finally, customer service. You speak a lot of technical things, but one of the things that's quite conspicuous in this country, not in the public, but also in the private sector as well, is the absence of customer service. And so no matter how well planned and designed these systems are, if when we need to speak to real people, we don't get the kind of service we expect, and we have people who are distracted by looking at their phones and all these other things. May I ask that this transformation project include customer service as well, in the broadest sense of the term? And finally, this evening we had lots.
Sorry. Just because we said 2 questions per persons, I don't know if you want to take advantage of your opportunity there, thereby denying others of the chance to have asked more than one question.
Just a comment, if you bear with me. I noticed that of all the people who went up this evening to make presentations, all except 2 were men. I trust that the next time one of these forums, we'll see lots more women coming up to make the presentations because they are also in the hierarchy of the system. It seems very male-oriented at this time in its powers. Thank you.
Sorry, you want us to address some of the questions first, or you want to ask you? Okay. You want to deal with the oversight body? And
with respect to oversight, the government is really working from a whole of government digital transformation strategy, and that strategy was crafted with the support of Deloitte, really sets out a governance forum, well, a governance arrangement. And in relation to that governance arrangement, we have a number of committees. One of them is a site. Another one of what we call, hello? Yeah, right. So I was saying that the mic keeps, right, yeah. Right. So what I was saying is that the whole of government digital transformation strategy has put in place or has recommended a governance arrangement. And so the question that was raised by the gentleman who asked a question a while ago is very spot on. We have a number of committees that are part of that oversight arrangement, one of them being a project oversight committee. So we're not a law unto ourselves. We are reporting to people, making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, meeting the goals and objectives and so on within particular timelines. We also have a committee called an architectural design committee. So we have people who are going to be providing support. We're not experts at everything. We have people with good solid skills within the unit and the department. But we believe as we are trying to build out systems that can prove the test of time and all sorts of things, that we get the best minds in the room to help to advise. So those are some of the things we've put in place in relation to the governance arrangement. The last thing I want to speak about before the minister takes the mic, about real consultation. I think we approach consultation with an open mind. And if we believe that suggestions have come forward which add value, we certainly take them on board. There isn't an interest that anybody has to not take suggestions on board that we think will add value. So we are genuine in our consultation, in our outreach for input from members of the public. Right, so digital transformation has not been costed as a single project. We have a number of projects, some of which are being funded by separate ministries. So for example, we have the human resource management system that Christopher talked about a while ago. That is being funded by the Human Resource Management Department. We know what it costs. I think it's going to cost us nearly $500,000, right? But as we engage service providers and they tell us what their cost is, we would know what the precise costs are. We know what our priorities are, and we have a good idea as to what some of those priorities are going to cost. Sometimes we are surprised by what the cost is when we go out and ask people to tell us what it's going to cost. At other times, we are kind of spot on in terms of our own estimations and so on, our estimates. The long and short is we are prioritizing, and as we prioritize, we determine what those costs are going to be. A lot of the things that we envisage to accomplish, we may not be able to accomplish. And a lot of the things that we intend to accomplish will be accomplished only over a significant amount of time, 10 years or more, right? So it's difficult to project on cost, but we do have a budget that we work with annually for digital transformation specifically, which is roughly $2.5 million. But of course, we're also working with ministries that would have their own budget allocations for some of the projects that we're helping them with.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to add to some of the responses by His Excellency Kati. Respect to our oversight body, the question on that. Even in our Data Protection Act, I think there is an officer identified for that purpose. In the one in Jamaica, I think there's an office. And so as we look at the regulation, as we look at the legislation, this is something that we're going to pay attention to. How do we safeguard to ensure that everybody who is a player in the space of having data is held accountable? And so it already exists to some extent in our law here. And as we improve upon that, I presume that it is going to take the form of something similar to the Jamaican model, where you have an office that can do auditing, that you can file complaints, and so on, etc. So thank you for raising it. but we definitely will pay attention to that. I think Mr. Carty addressed the cost issue. Every year, of course, we prioritize. So there's a whole of government strategy, and we prioritize what we can do in the next year to 2 years, etc. And then we present in this process that we're doing now, budget consultation process, that, look, these are our priorities for this year in our long-term plan. And so that continues to happen. What the form of consent would be. Now, after we go through this process where we can have meaningful consultation and recommendations are made and everything goes into practice, the form of consent is going to be you who decide that, should I give the bank this information? And you decide yes or no. You're not going to have my information. And the bank is not going to be able to then legally and lawfully, and also probably technically, be able to go and get that information without doing something nefarious, which of course will put the systems in place to try and protect. So the form of consent is going to be you deciding at the time, do I provide this information? So for instance, the ecosystem will develop such that maybe a promoter may have a FET, and they want to ensure that only persons over the age of 18 enter, because there is going to be, what's the age to drink in St. Kitts? It's 18 or 21? I think it's 21. And they want to ensure that only persons over 21 enter. And they may develop an app that uses the ID. But the only information that their app might be able to pull is the age information. And so when you show up, you decide whether or not you want to give that information. If not, of course, it's their private event, you don't go. So the form of consent, when it is operational, is going to be you deciding what institution or what service has the information that they are requesting to do the particular service. We answered the real consultation question. Customer service, this is something we can take on board for consideration, but off the cuff, I don't suspect that the Digital Transformation Unit is going to be the one responsible for the interface that you have at all service portals around the country. And I think that might be placed somewhere else in order to manage that particular thing. However, given that you have raised the question, we'll put it on board. Male-oriented, I think earlier this year we had, well, every year there is Girls in ICT, and there is an intentional push to encourage women to get in ICT. It is still, in our context, a male-dominated field. And obviously the persons who came to speak tonight were speaking as the experts in their own specific field. And what we hope is that what we're doing in terms of encouraging girls in ICT and girls at STEM, etc., will create a more equal balance. I want the same to be true for everything, though, because there are some fields that males are almost non-existent. And we also need to ensure that there is balance in those fields, because many years ago, a young Calypsonian sang a song, Boys in Danger. I don't know if you know him. That was 30 years ago. And the reality is that in many fields, boys are tremendously, and men are in danger, and so we need to have a balanced approach that we provide the opportunity for either gender to have access to all of these opportunities.
Good evening. My name is Janelle Mason. I work in the Prime Minister's office as well as with Mr. Duncan here in the e-government unit at the Department of Technology to make my work more efficient and seamless. My two questions: how does the government envision the EID supporting secure e-commerce transactions, e-payments, as well as for future potentially digital or cryptocurrency-based services within the St. Kitts and Nevis economy? The second question is there a long-term or short-term roadmap for connecting the EID to other high-demand services? I know you mentioned health records and tax filing, such as voter registration and online voting for persons who are out there in the diaspora, local citizens, I think, instead of they having to fly here to vote for an election.
Oh, so you want to finish off the questions and then okay, so we have, I think, 3 more persons there. So we'll take the remaining questions and then wrap.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Jeanne Williams-Knight. I am representing the Intellectual Property Office in the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs. Thank you to the Digital Transformation Unit for the invitation here this evening. I just wanted to say that, one suggestion that perhaps persons who are interested in receiving more information could leave their email addresses with somebody in the unit, and you give the commitment that you send things to them directly as well as publishing it publicly. I had more questions, but in the interest of time, I'll just make a comment. Mr. Herbert, when he gave his presentation, mentioned, I agree with him when he said most offices are still manual. As the head of an office who is part manual and part digital, I think there needs to be a stronger, and to use a term that the minister just used, whole of government approach in digital transformation. Because, for example, we see some offices using stamps, whereas Inland Revenue, you could pay online from your home. I think we need to have a more systematic and uniformed position on digital transformation, a strong mandate from Cabinet, insisting that all offices make some sort of effort to identify their needs that would help them be able to offer their services. Now, we're talking about EID, so I could understand the focus on health records and medical records and things of that nature. But there are other government services that people still have to come in and do manually. So I think that as part of the mandate for the Digital Transformation Unit, there should be some sort of directive given to all government departments to move towards digitization so that whenever the EID comes on board, other people are, further along in the process so that you don't have to wait another 5-10 years for this office to catch up. So a project that I've always envisioned seeing in government as far as it relates to digital transformation is for every office who needs to digitize to say what they will need in order to digitize. And if it means that the IT department or the digital transformation unit could collect all those needs, order all the scanners, hire a team of people to scan, deploy them in different offices. When one is finished, they move to another one, so that, as I said, the whole of government moves together rather than, one being way ahead and others still very far behind. So that was my suggestion and recommendation.
Okay, good evening. I came initially with a lot of questions, but as I listened to the team present, questions dwindle. I could remember years ago having to clear a vehicle from customs and thinking that it didn't appear that someone thought about the process because I was here, then there, then somewhere else, so just the idea that this digital transformation is taking place is commendable. Still, there may be the need for some connecting the dots. For example, the group with disabilities. For example, what would happen if it's determined that, and also over age, let's say over the age of 65, although they may not be disabled by virtue of nature, you know, their eyesight, their abilities may be dwindling. And so, for persons like those, they may need support with device assistance. I know the Ministry of Education has been doing that over the last few years, providing devices for students. And I'm just saying, it's very commendable. I didn't want to travel so far and not say anything. But, you know, and I also don't want to be branded in a particular field. I love technology, but I see some management challenges in looking through and seeing what can improve, what can be better. But overall, I want to commend the team and, you know, continue on the right track.
Yes, good night. My name is Kashrai Tweed. I'm a farmer. I heard the minister mention about agriculture and farming. For example, we have 10 farmers on St. Kitts, and they're producing the same product. When would we be able to tell the wholesale importers when to stop import? Because you cannot put the farmers to work on the farm, and at this point in time, you have some farmers without water, but the rainfalls are constantly now, so then the constant production, it just keep rolling over, rolling over. For also, the amount of sucklings, bananas, planting, dashing, and all those things that brought in on the island, presently now, they're producing. But the local farmers ain't on the market for their produce, because what is being imported is at a much cheaper cost. But why is it then the rule, I keep saying government, you know, but I want to say ruling administrators, because we are the government, the person back here are the government. We pay the taxes. Why is it the farmers have to be going through so kind of hostile environment after so much hard work, they can't get the produce sell? For example, water and all of these things, I didn't come to ask no questions. But after hearing you mention agriculture, I had to ask questions. And you see this man on my face, on my chest here? It's so hard to see. We cannot, as farmers, back then, in this era here, agriculture was the major industry on this island. When I say agriculture, non-sugar agriculture. Because during back in this set of era here, cane cutters had 3 and 4 rows, plant, soil and all, pigeon peas and all kind of things. So then why is it we are not given that opportunity to say, well, we don't work hard, let us make our money, export. Markets are out there. I could recall I was exporting back then in 1999, and because of the ruling administrators, today Monday, I just would have come out of Canada. And we need to get down to the bottom of this thing. Because presently now, I am encountering some nasty decisions. The Commissioner of Police, the Prime Minister, Minister of Agriculture, and his permanent secretary, Mr. Minister, I'm going to give him a number. Please give me a call because it ain't going to be easy. Thanks.
Good night. Like many others, my questions that I came in with were answered, so kudos to the team for being very detailed this evening with the responses. But I do still have a question, and that has to do with security. Most of the concerns that have been brought up, security related, are with regard to external hacking attempts or persons on the inside who may attempt to use information they have access to nefariously. I speak specifically to the EID system, but I'm wondering, in a small country like St. Kitts and Nevis, where my grandparent might send me to the bank, or my neighbor who can't do something, ask me to run an errand, and they give me access to their EID, and they are the unscrupulous actor in the equation. What, if any, safeguards are in place to protect those sorts of vulnerable persons? Because we have protections for those living with disabilities, but I am wondering about that particular scenario where you may have identity theft or fraud attempts because of this PIN system involved in the EID system. Thank you.
We'll now take the last question.
Good evening, everyone. So I didn't intend to actually stand up and ask a question. But after listening in, there's something that wasn't asked. It was spoke about briefly, but it wasn't articulated in the way it should have been. But let me introduce myself first. My name is Brandon Powell, the ex-executive director for the St. Kitts Nevis Robotics Association. Honorable Kati, I'm sure you're very familiar with myself as well as the minister. I'm now the chief strategic director for the Robotics Association, and also for the president of the OECS Robotics Association for the region. My question is more in lines of cybersecurity per se, but not in the way, in shape or fashion, in terms of software-based, more human interaction-based, because there's an acronym PEPCAC. Problem exists between chair and device. But to be specific, data sovereignty. Now, I know that there are certain conditions, policy, tokenizations, the fancy technological terms that really geared towards protecting our software and our digital integrity. But in terms of a layered access system, such as a stakeholders access level, for example, multiple persons that's involved in the EID project building, whether local, whether international, and Taiwan, for example, being a big player. Not only I saw them listed as a stakeholder in terms of funding and also being a part of the development aspect. Now, I recognize and acknowledge the fact that Taiwan is a very great partner towards the entire government of St. Kitts and Nevis, and we appreciate their efforts in every single way, shape, or form or fashion. But at the end of the day, they're still a different sovereignty nation. Now, it's one thing to build and design a product for a sole purpose, but at the same time, maintenance, post-care, when data is starting to be collected, would they still play a role in terms of accessing these sensitive data? The updates, the changes, and that's another question. Well, a quick caveat as well in terms of I've witnessed solutions over the years, given that my background is heavy in tech, where the government introduced new systems, new technologies, and so forth to really fix a problem, because that's what these type of services do. But as the years progresses, I noticed that there's more of a downward maintenance. So what's the post-care maintenance playbook, if there is one, and what it looks like in terms of the long-term sustainability of the project? I'm not against it. I open-handedly welcome the project, because it's actually a betterment for the ease of access for persons within the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis. That's pretty much one of the questions. The second question is local and private specialists. I think I remember you mentioned something about specialists in the area, Dr. Khan, in terms of whether it's consultation or some sort of liaison in terms of what the field, the commitment is. We do have, I'm not going to say that we don't have the necessary skill set here in St. Kitts and Nevis to do certain things. We do have one or two persons that's able to even entertain the conversation or understand certain things, or even might even take over the project and execute. Just looking around the room, I could acknowledge Rodney Brown being one of those big-time players in terms of long-term service in the tech industry. What persons like us would like to know. Well, asking this question for myself, I don't know if anybody else is asking the same question. How can we be a part of these transformational projects, right? And even if it's technical, well, I hope it's technical, because there is some ideas, especially from the young persons that's in the field of tech, that's more up-to-date in terms of the modern technological era today, and what is trending versus what's going to work versus what's not going to work.
Thank you very much for the questions. Let's see, go back up to the top here. supporting e-commerce. There's a question about that from the young lady. The first one, Tracy. I think Mr. Carty can elaborate some more. But what, for instance, the EID allows for is for us to conceive and develop any service that we need now because we have a mechanism to support the authentication of who is doing the business. So whenever we get to that particular service that you're interested in, we now have a system that someone can rely on to determine that it is the right person who is accessing this information and who can participate in that service. I think Mr. Carty could go further if needed on that. You mentioned online voting. That is not a consideration before the committee or before the Digital Transformation Unit. But again, once you have the tool, then if you envision a particular service that is needed, then you'll be able to develop it knowing that you have this system available to you. Mrs. Williams-Knight spoke about the whole of government approach, which is correct. There is a whole of government strategy, and the reality is this is exactly why the Digital Transformation Unit has been set up, because over the years, we have been doing things in a siloed approach. So now they are developing the processes, the policies, the programs, in order to try and centralize or organize the efforts of the government. Now, it can't happen overnight. So, for instance, we spoke about the data and information standards, etc. So, eventually there will come a time when Cabinet will say, for instance, that no department can develop this, develop a service unless it goes through this unit to verify that everything is how it is supposed to be. So that approach is what we are doing now in terms of the whole of government approach, because you are right, different departments are doing different things and going at different speeds. I also want to say, though, it is not necessarily, because you always have constraints in terms of resources, it will not always be possible for all of government to move all at the same time. And we will have to identify what our priorities are. So this year, the priority might be that customs is a place where the government sees that it's wholly inefficient and it's going to bring immediate improvement. So that is the priority for this year. Or next year, it could be that the priority has shifted to capturing the data for agriculture, for instance. The farmer spoke about agriculture. I'm going to respond to him very shortly on that. So we are going to have to identify our priorities and say these are the departments, ministries that we have to move forward on. But in the meantime, we also develop the policies that will guide anybody else who has to move and get the approval from the requisite department. Okay. Thanks for the comment on connecting the dots. We had addressed the issue with persons with disabilities earlier. The farmer, Mr. Tweed, thank you for your intervention. I know that you are extremely passionate about your farming, that even in a forum like this that doesn't specifically relate to any specific sector, you always take the opportunity to speak about farming and agriculture. What I would say, though, is that what digital transformation offers is, imagine a situation now where Mr. Tweed has his EID that is linked to a farm that he has, and a portal that, say, the Ministry of Agriculture keeps, that can show the crops that you produced just this morning. And so a supermarket or something can see that right now in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have 600 pounds of tomatoes ready for purchase. And instead of them going and clicking, because that is effectively what they do when they order overseas, somebody has an inventory there that says that I have 400 pounds of tomato available, and they are at this price. Now imagine if we can do the same thing for our local farmers, and digital transformation allows us that. So it becomes now easier for those service providers to access the products or produce that you have. The question of security and identity theft in terms of from Ms. Brandon. I'll let Honorable Carty, His Excellency Carty, say a bit more on that. But just to say that this is now what the digital ID helps to reduce in terms of identity theft. Because yes, you may have your print, but you still have to be the person. Sorry, you may have the PIN, but you still need to be the person. So, right. So unless, and in the process, it doesn't mean that you will get rid of identified international practices of having support persons for persons who need the assistance. For instance, there will have to be an instance where if someone can't come to the bank, that there is some policy developed that the bank is sure that the original person really intended for this to happen. It won't be that Ebony Brandon will show up with your grandmother's ID, put in her PIN, and because you look nothing like your grandmother, that they will just provide the service. So these are some of the policies that will have to be established as to how will an institution accept someone showing up claiming that they are a particular person. And I think that throughout this process, the Digital Transformation Unit will assist in creating that type of framework for that trust verification. But the EID now allows for more scrutiny to ensure that the person who is presenting themselves is really the authentic person. I presume that institutions will be able to ask security questions because for verification purposes, just like you do now with your credit card, maybe you have to call online, they may ask you some specific things. It is not everything that is going to be presented on the card. So all of the information is not going to be on the card. So there's an opportunity, for instance, where if you present the card, some security questions could be asked if the person perceives that there is fraudulent activity. And only if you know the data on the card, you might be able. So things like that will be entertained. And then the last gentleman spoke of data sovereignty and will third parties like Taiwan, etc. What will happen when you have third parties who have provided services, etc. I'll let Mr. Carty deal with that. But at every step of this process, we want to ensure that there is data integrity and security. So there is always going to be some step of verification as to who and when or why they can access the information. And the beauty about data, digital transformation is, again, it makes it so much easier to actually track the access of information. There's so many things that you can do to ensure that we have the level of security that is needed, that once something is done by a third party, it's locked away. In order for them to have access, they have to go through a protocol and so on. These things are well established. And local and private specialists, we want you to be a part of the process. And that is why we are being transparent, for instance, like now, but also in the services that we identify that we need. You must pay attention to the website. For any service that we need, will probably be always posted on, for for whatever, whether it is a tender document, etc., as to what service is needed. So yes, we want you a part of the process. We want you to stay in tune to the process, and we want you to accept the tenders when they're available and propose. And we're going to create forums like this and stakeholder engagements where when we need specialized services or we want to hear from you, you can indicate your interest to assist us in this development. So, Mr. Cartier, I don't know if there are a couple of things you want to add.
I could add a few things, starting from the last comment that the minister made, which is dealing with the involvement of local people. Brandon asked about that, and I know there are people in the room as well who are interested in participating. The last time we took a request, or the last time we took a recommendation for the award of contract to the board, the procurement board, they were particularly interested in the participation of locals because they are prepared to say to us, we don't mind in a situation where a tender coming from a local may be a little bit more, because there are those instances, than a proposal that is put forward by somebody who may not be a national of St. Kitts and Nevis, somebody from Jamaica, somebody from India, wherever you are. We have people who are participating internationally, India, the UK, Canada, the US, and so forth. So those are the people you are competing with, right? One of the most recent conversations with the minister, he was interested in making sure that we were able to publicize whatever opportunities we have to local business people. So we'll make sure that we develop a small directory of persons who have particular interest in providing services, and so that we can maybe send this to them directly rather than expecting them to be continuously checking where we made these postings. But it would also be good if you were to keep your sights on wherever these things are posted, which is on the SKNS website, right? And from time to time, you can call and make contact and so forth. So we really want to make sure that we can send information to you directly. The last comment I want to make, because I think the minister really spoke very detailed, in a very detailed way to the questions that have been asked, is the digital ID. The digital ID is a highly trusted form of identity. It is based on what we call the public key infrastructure. It's difficult to foil. It's difficult to get around. You have private public key. You have digital certificates. So when you walk into a bank and you say, well, this is my digital ID, how are you going to get around the bank being able to tell, because of the information that is associated with the card and what the digital identity does, right? You're going to have to fake being the person, right? So you can't just say you're your grandmother. I mean, just because you have the card. Even if you were to erase the picture and replace that, the way the digital ID works is not based upon a picture necessarily. It's based upon public key infrastructure, private public key, issued by a certificate authority, rock solid. This is the technology we use in the real world, that banks use, that large organizations use. So it's not easily foilable, right? So you would have to, first of all, pretend that you're your grandmother, right? And all those things. So it is a lot more complicated than that. So just want to say that it is rock solid. And the last thing I want to probably do is to maybe answer a bit of Tracy's questions, right? To me, Tracy's question was about security to one extent, to a certain extent, and I've just kind of spoken to that. But it's about how the EID can be used to support an economic ecosystem, an ecosystem of services, and so on and so on. And this is an area in which we have had some support from Cybernetica, Minister, which he approved. Cybernetica is a company out of Estonia, and the minister would have told you that Estonia is really one of the leader in government digital transformation. And so we thought it would be of value to us to get the support of a company out of Estonia, Cybernetica. They were giving us, have been giving us advice on the development of the EID, but they're also providing advice as to how we can develop services that the EID would be able to support. So there is a strategic eye, on what we're doing. They would have wrapped up their consultancy just about a month ago. We have the documentation, we are pouring over it, and of course, we would want to make sure that we bring people in, people like yourselves, look at the documentation and see how we can really make use of the advice that we're being given as to how we can develop the ecosystem to be supported by the EID. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Just one thing I wanted to say before you wrapped up or bring this session to a close is I was reflecting on the former president of Estonia. When we were there, we had the privilege of meeting him. This is one of them who had presided over a period of that transformation. And in his book, and I think at the forum we were at, he gave us the story of him moving to Silicon Valley to be a lecturer at a university somewhere there. And he pointed this out because it was Silicon Valley, where all of the leading tech firms in the world exist. Google, you call them, they're in Silicon Valley. And he mused to say, here is he coming from a small European country, and for him to get his daughter, I think it was, enrolled in school, he had to get some information from, I think, the local school, drive half an hour to an area where they had to photocopy the information, do something manual, so on, go through the process of registration and a whole other bunch of things, wait for them to reply, maybe a few days or a few weeks later. And he said, here am I going to Silicon Valley, this epicenter of technological advancement, and it's taking me days to register my daughter for school for something that I can do in 30 seconds in Estonia. 30 seconds. Because he would log on, find the school, use his ID, everything that is needed for the school to register the child is then automatically pulled. And so we now are creating or want to create a similar experience where your timelines will be significantly improved such that you can find time to do other things instead of spending the inordinate amount of time to get any type of service in our federation. And so that's part of the vision that we have. And as I close, I want again to thank the leadership of the Digital Transformation Unit, Chief Digital Transformation Officer, Mr. Nigel Carty, and his entire team at DTU. I want to thank the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of ICT, who unfortunately could not be here tonight because of illness, and it's pointed out to me that the PS is a female, the past directors of ICT are female, and some, I think, of the lead in the lead departments in the ministry, I think it's 2 or 3 of them are also female. So thank you for that. So I want to thank the ICT PS and all of the leaders in the ICT department as well for the extraordinary amount of work that is being done. This is not easy work. It is, in some cases, very highly specialized, and I think that they're doing an excellent job. I want to thank them for all of the information that was presented here tonight, and we will continue in this vein to ensure that we learn from the pitfalls of other countries in particular, so that we are much better
when we really get fully online. Thank you very much. Hand it over to Ms. Burridge.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the Digital Transformation Town Hall meeting. I take this opportunity to thank Minister Maynard and Mr. Carty. I thank the presenters. I thank you, the public, and everyone who participated for their enthusiasm. Also, a gentle reminder to follow the Facebook page of the Digital Transformation Unit. Have a pleasant evening.